Hi, today we're going to look at animation using layers in 3ds Max. To begin with, I'll just show you where they are. So if you right click on anywhere in the grey neutral space here up in the menu, and he says looking for it, there it is, and so right click and just click on animation layers. Yours might end up floating around like this. Doesn't matter, just dock them whenever you get the chance. So dock them up there. Okay, those layers are going to be very helpful because we're going to have three different elements influencing the sphere, and we want to control those elements individually. So I'll show you what's going on. If I just hit the play button, the sphere is bouncing along a path. As it contacts the ground, it's squashing slightly, or dramatically actually, in truth, and that's being controlled by a modifier. So it's got a modifier influencing it, it's also got a bounce animation going on, and it's constrained to a path. So there are three things influencing the same sphere, and what we want to do is keep those three elements kind of separate so that we can control one without necessarily influencing the other. It's, like you would in Photoshop, it's kind of non-destructive editing or video editing, so you're stacking your animation processes. Okay, so we'll have a look at how we're going to do that today. I'll just pause that for a sec, and I'll scrub it so I can see the sphere, select the sphere, and I'll come to the animation control area. Okay, so we've got three layers. We've got the base layer, which is actually the path constraint. We've got the bounce layer, which is quite simply this element. I'll show you through the curve editor, it's easier. What I'll do is I'll go down the object list, so objects, look for the sphere, come along until you can see one. There's the path constraint, which is sitting on the base layer. But we've also got the bounce layer, which is, as you see, very clearly named bounce layer, which we'll do later on. And the Z position is the only thing I'm interested in looking at this point. And as you can see, I've actually only got 1, 2, 3 keyframes created. The rest of the animation is a loop which has been created using the parameter out of curves editor, which I'll show you when we're actually setting this animation up. And a little bit further down, underneath the modified object rollout, there it is, modified object, we also have the stretch modifier, and I'll show you where that is, and it's here. And again, as you can see, I've actually only got 1, 2, 3, the third one is just down the screen, you can't quite see it, 4, 5 keyframes for this one. Okay, so actually I'm creating as few keyframes as I can, and I'm using the parameter outer curves to loop animations, and I'm going to show you how that works. Some of you will be comfortable with this, some of you will take a little bit longer because perhaps you haven't done it before, and it can be a little bit kind of bewildering or awkward at first, but actually it's a really useful tool. Okay, so here we go. What I shall do is start again. So I'll just pause this for a second. And I think I will hide the selection. So I'll keep the same path. I'll make a new sphere. I'll make sure that the colour's a little bit easier to see than that. So nice and yellow. Radius of 10 units. And the first thing I'm going to do is enable animation layers, and we want them for, we could have them for all the different animation properties, but actually we need position, rotation, scale ticked, and we need modifiers ticked, and we'll just say OK to that. Okay, so we've got a base layer. What I'm going to do, just for clarity's sake, because I don't think I can rename this base layer, I'm going to put a brand new layer in straight away called click on the add animation layer, and I'll just call it path layer. Okay, so that, and also this is really important, I'll just point this out, use default controller type. unless you specifically want to duplicate active controllers from another layer when you're adding a new layer, just make sure that is unticked unless you actually want to use it. Okay, so use default controller type, path layer, say OK. We're going to add an animation, position controller and path constraint. So click on path constraint, and did I get it? Let's have a little look. I think I did. There we go. And as you can see, the sphere is slightly buried into the ground plane. We can deal with that later, it's not a big issue. Oh, and my time configuration, by the way, I've got my animations running for 600 frames. If yours is set to the default of 100, you might want to change that down here in the time configuration window. And you can set the end time to 600 and just say OK. Alright, so look at our animation layers. We've got our base layer, which has got nothing on it. We've got our path layer, which is currently controlling the movement of the ball along that pathway. Okay, good. Right, so let's create another layer. This one we will call the bounce layer. Okay. And I'm going to actually set the bounce up using the curve editor. So I'll just show you, it's really simple. Curve editor. I want to make sure that I'm working on the right layer, so look for it now. So we've got the base layer, got our path layer. A little bit further down we've got our bounce layer, and the only thing I want to do is work on the Z position. The reason being, we're basically just going to make the ball bounce up and down once, so it's just going to move up and down the Z axis once. So let's just do that really quickly. So if I can go get back there. Sometimes zooming around in this window can be a little bit tricky. If you're finding it difficult, use the horizontal, vertical and then zoom region extents. Okay, so what I'm going to do is right click, choose add keys, and it doesn't matter where I put these, but I can go 1, 2, 3. So that will be the up state, the down state, and then the up state again. Okay, get my move key, move controller, and select one of the keys and right click on it to bring up this little window. And what it tells me is that keyframe 1 is currently at the 14th frame. Well, I want to make that 0, so I've right clicked on those spinners. I want to set the value to 100. Type that in, hit return, move on. Keyframe 2, I'm going to set that to the 15th frame, and the value is going to be 0. Leave that as it is. Keyframe 3, I'm going to set that to 30 frames, to the 30th frame, sorry, and a value again of 100. Hit return, close that window, zoom out slightly. I'm just going to use the zoom region tool to help me see what I've got. Okay, so as long as yours looks like this, all is going well. So back to my move tool, select the top 2 keyframes, and I'm going to use the, excuse me, I'm going to set the tangents to slow, and I'm going to set this tangent down here to fast. Okay, so slow at the top, that's the apex of the bounce where the energy of the object just slows down slightly, and at the bottom the tangent is set to fast. Okay, so it should be 0, 15 and 30. Once that's happened, once you've done that, sorry, select all 3 keyframes, then right click in the neutral space up here. From the load layout option, choose the function curve layout classic. Okay, now we're going to use the parameter curve out of range type. Okay, so here we go. Just click that box once, and I'm just going to hit loop and say OK. And you can see that I've set 3 keyframes up, but now it's looped indefinitely. So let's do our little check at what's happened in our animation window. If we look down here, we've got our 1, 2, 3 keyframes. That's all we get to see. But now the ball is bouncing throughout the whole animation because we've used the parameter out of curve type. So the ball is bouncing, that's the bounce layer affecting that. Then we've got the path constraint underneath it. The two of them are operating together, and we can see under the motion tab base layer, path layer and bounce layer. The bounce layer is currently active with a little arrow beside it. All good so far, so I'll just pause that for a second. Okay, let's add one more layer. Animation layer, we'll call this stretch layer. Oh, stretch layer. Use default controller type one more time. Okay. This one requires us to make 5 keyframes rather than 1. So just select the sphere again. Go to 0. I'm just going to have to just move the window so I can see what I'm doing here. Go to 0. And we know that the sphere touches the ground at frame 15. So let's work with that. Go to the Modifier tab. We're going to add the stretch modifier on there. So where are we? Oh, sorry, missed that. Do that again. Stretch modifier. There we go. I'm going to put my Alt key on. At frame 0, leave it alone. Get to frame 15 where it touches the ground plane there. And I'm going to set the stretch to something like 0.4 or 0.5, something of that order. I'll go for 0.4. And then we know at frame 30, at the apex of the bounce, we want the stretch to be back to 0. Now if I left that just as we've done it there with 1, 2, 3 keyframes, if I left that alone, what would happen is that the stretch modifier would influence the shape of the ball from frame 0 all the way through to 15. Now you may choose to do that, but I don't think that's appropriate because the ball shouldn't be stretching until it touches the ground. So what we're going to do is at frame 14, so just inch forward till you get to frame 14, and then put the stretch modifier properties back to 0. Right click on the spinner. That means that it's at 0 at its stretch modifier is at 0, and it's also at 0 at frame 14. But then the minute it touches the ground, it comes into effect. And then on the other side of the bounce, I'm going to give it more than just one frame. I'm going to go to frame 17 or even 18, and here I'm going to put the stretch modifier back to 0 again. So let's have a little look. So it goes bing, squashes, and then rises back to its normal shape. So I've made 5 free keyframes in total. Okay, turn my Alt key off. Going to go back to my curve editor, and I'm going to be looking now for the stretch layer. There it is. And so that's my stretch layer, but if you click on it, you don't get to see anything. You've got to go all the way down, well, a fair bit of the way down, until you see this rollout called a modified object. Under the modified object, we open up the stretch modifier and we look for the word stretch. Once we click on it, we'll see the 3 keyframes, and if you zoom in a little bit, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one, or the middle one, is right down here. Not easy to see, but it's there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to take the top keyframes, set the tangents to slow, bottom keyframe, make sure I actually select it. It's not easy, I'm working a little bit like I can't really see it, but there it is. Set that to fast, and then select all the keyframes, right click in the grey neutral area, load layout window, function curve classic, click on parameter curve out of range, hit loop, say OK, close the window, and we've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keyframes down there. Hit the play animation, and there's the little bounce and stretch as it follows the trajectory of the path there. All good. Okay, just pause that for a sec. Gonna click on the actual line and just say hide. Right click, choose hide selection, and now just turn it around. Hit play. And one thing I'm noticing is that the 3-layered animation is working fine, except if you remember way back at the beginning I mentioned the fact that the ball seemed to be going through the ground plane. So let's just have a little look. Unhide all. Take that. Oh, there's the other ball as well. The one I hid from the beginning, so we can see the two of them now operating together. Okay, so the blue one, interestingly, is bouncing much higher, and if you can remember when I was introducing today's topic, the reason being is that when you click on it and go to the bounce layer, you can just very quickly scroll up and down the influence of that layer. So I can do the same over here. I can scroll that up, he says, without... Oh, I put that back. Put that back to 100. I wasn't looking at what I was doing. Go back to the bounce layer and scroll it up. There we go. So they're both kind of bouncing at the same sort of speed. Okay, so good. The only thing I was going to show you is that at frame 15, when the yellow ball touches the ground, I think I might just hide that blue one. I think I'll just hide that. 1, 2, 3, hide selection. I think if we look at it from the front window, it is indeed going through the ground plane. So what we need to do is select the path and just lift it up a little bit so that the contact is either just touching the ground or a little bit buried into it and might suggest a better point of contact. So I'll just leave it there. Go back to my perspective window. Have a little look again. 1, 2, 3. Looks nice. It is a real little bouncing bean. It's got a little bit of character to it. Seems to be going on its happy, merry little way. Okay, I mean, obviously you can add lights, shadows, and elements for it to bounce around, interact with, etc. But primarily, just to recap, what we're really looking at here is the fact that the animation is being influenced by 3 separate layers, which can be the influence of each layer can be increased or decreased as you see fit. Okay, so just to remind you, you can find the layer information there, but you can also find it underneath the motion tab over here, and there they are. But it's not as easy in truth to deal with or look at it. But you can see that the weight for the bounce layer has been turned up to 340 because you saw me do that over here. Okay, I think that's about it. I hope that works for you. Okay, cheers.